Good morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm Eric Corliss, and today we are going to be discussing the different types of tissues within the body. There are four main types: the epithelial, which protects and encases many parts of the body; connective tissue, which supports the body structurally as well as transporting wastes and resources; muscle tissue, which provides movement as well as additional protection; and nervous tissue, which communicates electrochemical signals throughout the body. Epithelial tissue serves to line all the body parts exposed to the outside world. It is tightly packed with little to no extracellular matrix in between. The immediate and obvious example is your skin, but epithelial tissue also lines your esophagus and your airways, as these parts are somewhat exposed to outside interference. Another important quality to note about epithelial tissue is that it is avascular, meaning there is no direct blood supply going to this tissue, and this means that it must receive its nutrients through diffusion and absorption. In columnar cells, the nuclei tend to be elongated and located near the basal end of the cell, or the end of the cell that is furthest from the surface of the organ or tissue, and the organelles will be shifted towards the apical end, or the end furthest from the organ or tissue. The apical end will also be covered in cilia, which aid in nutrient absorption and, in the case of the respiratory system, remove particulates from the airways. Overall, epithelial tissue plays many key functions in your body, including protecting from abrasions, absorption and secretion of substances, and providing a flexible area for things like the bladder and lungs. Now, epithelial cells can be either squamous, which means they are flat and thin; cuboidal, having a cubic or rounded cubic shape; or columnar, and having a long and thin, almost rectangular shape. These can form in simple layers, meaning they form a single layer, and any of the three types can form a simple layer. Simple squamous cells are located in alveoli, the lining of the heart, blood vessels, and lymphatic vessels. Simple cuboidal cells can be found in the secretory portions of small glands, as well as the kidney tubules. Simple columnar cells can be ciliated, found in the uterus and the bronchi, and unciliated, which can be found in the digestive tract and the bladder. Stratified, which means forming in stacks or sheets that create layers, can be found on the skin in the case of keratinized, or lining of the mouth in the case of unkeratinized cells, meaning these cells haven't quite hardened and calcified to the outside world, much like the epidermis, which is keratinized. Stratified squamous cells line the esophagus, the mouth, and the vagina. Stratified cuboidal cells make up sweat glands, salivary glands, and mammary glands. And stratified columnar cells can be found in the male urethra and the ducts of some glands. You can also find pseudostratified cells, which only form in columnar shaped cells and consist of irregularly shaped and sized epithelial cells. These are ciliated and can be found mostly in the trachea and parts of the respiratory tract. Another additional category is transitional epithelia, which can be found in the urethra, bladder, and ureters and allow for those areas to expand and contract much more easily. Glandular epithelia are Glands are epithelial structures that either synthesize and secrete chemical substances or absorb chemical substances from the body. Endocrine glands, endo meaning inside, have no ducts and will secrete chemicals directly into the surrounding tissue or fluids. Exocrine, exo meaning outside, have ducts that open to the outside environment for this secretion. These glands can be unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular glands, like goblet cells, are typically found scattered around in the lining of mucous membranes. Multicellular glands develop from simple epithelium and work to secrete substances directly into a cavity or organ lining. That's all for the epithelial tissue, and now we'll move on to the connective tissue. Now, unlike epithelial tissue, connective tissue is dispersed within a large matrix, meaning there's lots of space in between. The surrounding matrix is typically composed of fluids, but can also be solid, like in bones. Its main function is to connect and support other tissues, as well as providing protection to organs and other delicate systems. Connective tissue is composed of three main types of cells. Fibroblasts are the most abundant and aid in the production of the extracellular matrix by secreting fibrous proteins like collagen. There are also smaller forms of these called fibrocytes, which are the second most abundant cell type in this tissue. Adipocytes store lipids and come in two types, white and brown. Brown adipocytes store their lipids as many droplets and are highly metabolically active. White adipocytes store their lipids as one large droplet and are much less metabolically active. Mesenchymal cells are adult stem cells and are able to differentiate into many different forms and functions, mostly to aid and repair damaged tissue. Connective fibers are composed of collagen fiber, elastic fiber, and reticular fiber. Collagen fiber has high tensile strength, meaning it resists tearing and breaking, giving ligaments and tendons their strength. Elastic fiber can stretch and return to its original shape, as the name suggests, and reticular fiber is made of the same subunits as collagen but are long and thin and are arranged in branching networks. Now, loose connective tissue can be found in between organs and gives them their cushion and support. This is mostly composed of adipose tissue, which, as you know, works as fat storage and has very little extracellular matrix. This is composed of the same white and brown adipocytes as discussed before. Areolar tissue is not very specialized. It is composed of the previously discussed tissue types and can be found in between organs, in muscle fibers, and in blood vessels. Reticular tissue is a mesh-like net that supports soft organs such as the spleen, the liver, and lymphatic tissues. Dense connective tissue, unlike loose connective tissue, contains lots of collagen, and this makes it much more resistant to stretching and bending. This can come in two varieties, either regular or irregular. The main difference is in regular tissue, the connective fibers are all parallel, and this adds to its tensile strength and its resistance to flex. Irregular tissue has randomly assorted fibers, giving more strength in one direction than the other. Sometimes they will form a crisscross mesh. The best example of dense connective tissue is the dermis of the skin, which is the inner layer beneath the epidermis. Regular tissue can be found in tendons and ligaments, but not all of these ligaments will have parallel fibers. Irregular tissues can be found in the arterial walls. Cartilage is a connective tissue consisting of collagenous fibers embedded in a matrix of chondroitin sulfates, which are polysaccharides. Inside this matrix are cartilage cells called chondrocytes, which are encapsulated by a thick layer of irregular connective tissue called the perichondrium. The three main types of cartilage tissue are hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage in the body, consisting of short collagen fibers and large amounts of proteoglycans. This can be found in the rib cage, the nose, and covers the bones where movable joints are formed. Fibrocartilage has thick bundles of cartilage spaced throughout, and this makes it thick, strong, and inflexible. The meniscus of the knee and the intervertebral space is composed of this type of tissue. Elastic cartilage contains collagen and proteoglycans in addition to elastic fibers, which give it stretchiness and flexibility. This can be found in the outsides of the ears. Bone is the hardest connective tissue and can be found providing support and protection throughout the entire body. Their extracellular matrix has collagen to keep the bones from shattering and mineralized calcium phosphate, which keeps the bones from flexing and bending. Both of these properties are important for their support and their function. In the opposite, we have the fluid connective tissues. Fluid connective tissues move throughout the body, transporting different chemicals and proteins. These come in two different forms, blood and lymph. Salt, nutrients, and waste products are all diffused and carried out through these liquid tissues. Blood cells and their components are formed inside of bone marrow. Erythrocytes, or red blood cells, carry oxygen all throughout the body with the help of the carrier protein hemoglobin. Leukocytes, or white blood cells, work with the immune system to fend off harmful invaders and foreign substances. Phagocytes, for instance, will envelop and digest foreign bodies in a process called phagocytosis, which means cell eating. Lymph is a combination of liquid matrix and white blood cells. Lymphatic capillaries allow for diffusion of large molecules which are transported directly into the blood. This allows substances to quickly get into the blood that otherwise couldn't enter the bloodstream directly. That's it for the connective tissues, and now we can start on the muscle tissues. Muscle tissues come in three varieties. These are skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Skeletal tissue, as the name implies, attaches to bones and contracts to provide movement and rigidity to body structures, and this contraction also generates body heat. Muscle cells, called myocytes, remain fairly constant in number for an organism's entire life. They also show a striated pattern due to alternating presence of actin and myosin, which are contractile proteins. Smooth muscle makes up areas where involuntary muscle movement is necessary, mainly the intestines where digestion happens, as well as the urinary and reproductive systems. Cardiac muscle, as the name strongly suggests, forms the walls of the heart and provides its regular contracting rhythm with very little, if any, external input. Cardiomyocytes form specialized junctions through which they communicate electrochemical signals, which allows them all to work in unison and beat in the same regular pattern. Nervous tissue is our final tissue type, and this comes in two types: neurons and neuroglia. Neurons consist of three main components in a very specialized morphology. These are the dendrites, which branch off of the sides and reach out to other neurons; the long tail, called the axon. This is insulated in a fatty myelin sheath, which allows for the passage of electric signals; and the synapse is the gap in between neurons where electric and neurotransmitter signals travel and provide communication. The neuroglia is essentially the glue that holds the neural structure together, and it does so by producing fatty myelin, which not only insulates but binds the neurons together. Oligodendrocytes are cells that produce myelin inside of the brain and the spinal cord, which is the central nervous system, and Schwann cells produce myelin inside of the peripheral nervous system on the outsides of these areas.